Today we're going to show you how easy it is to switch from a carburetor to an EFI system. So Frank, we've done a few of these high output small block Ford engines here in the past at Dandy Engines. Tell us a little bit about this combination and what we're going to be doing today.
It's no different to the rest of our run-of-the-mill 800 horsepower small block Ford. So we just basically ran it in with a Carby, and we wanted to make a quick video to show people how easy it was to put an external computer EFI and wire it up.
Yeah, it's not that daunting, and anyone with a little bit of nous at home could probably do this themselves.
Well, that's what we thought we'd show you. I mean, it can plug in and have the engine running within an hour.
Yeah, okay. Oh.
It's a bit easier on an engine dyno.
Of course, yeah.
It's not that hard to plug in, and we'll show that in the video.
Yeah, and we're going to be using a Carby style inlet system still with the EFI. We're not switching to a fancy manifold.
We're just going to have a throttle body, and it doesn't have any fuel reserve bowls or nothing. So it's basically just going to let the air in.
Yep.
And the TPS will read that and so on.
Now the objective here isn't trying to make more power. It's just about showing how easy it is to convert, and obviously the advantages you've got with running an EFI system. Correct.
We just want to show people how easy it is to remove a carburetor, plug the fuel system in for EFI, and then show an EFI system being plugged.
All right, well, let's just run it up now quickly with the carburetor, and then we'll show some of the parts we're going to put on the engine.
Let's do it.
So we just did that run with the Carby. Now, we weren't chasing anything, it was just really running the engine in.
It was pretty much the first or second pull on the engine. You know, it's about where it should be. I mean, look, like I said, we're not trying to make power, we just want to show everyone how easy it is to plug a harness in.
Now, obviously, we've saved a bit of time because we've already got the manifold ready here. So Frank, just run through some of the parts we're going to be using today on this engine.
Well, we have a pre-made harness that's already terminated for all the injectors and all the sensors. Then we have wideband nanos, which are basically air-fuel ratio readers, and they convert the signal and send it to the ECU for data logging. We've gone with the FT Spark on this one, so we don't have to run an MSD box or nothing. Just simplifies the whole system.
Yeah.
And the FT 600, that's a choice of the customer.
Now, obviously, depending on the customer's needs, you don't need to go for the highest end product, do you?
No, you can start with a 450. It just means it's got less inputs and outputs.
Yeah.
And then the 550 will have a few more again.
And here's our throttle body.
Yeah, basically we're going to remove the Carby, and we've still got the same butterfly combination, and we just plug it in with a TPS and away we go. So what we're doing here is we're going to sync or basically set the reference up so the computer sees 50 degrees on the balancer, so we can sync them all together and adjust the timing, so the timing will be synced on fire up. So basically when we get this off, which normally just falls off, there you go. At 50 degrees after top dead center, we need a magnet to line up. As you can see, we're in between two magnets. That's the closest magnet now, so we're going to put it in place.
So Frank, moving to EFI, we're going to have to put in an O2 or a couple of O2 sensors, yeah?
Well, yeah, minimum you just need one, but in this case we're going to put two because that's what comes with this kit. We're just going to remove the carbureted one and add the EFI one so the unit can read it.
Got a few wires there, mate.
Yeah, it looks a little untidy until you get it all apart.
It certainly looks more daunting than it is, doesn't it?
No.
But everything's terminated.
So this is what we wanted to show you, how easy it actually is once you unpack it and unwrap it. Probably one of the easiest harnesses that you can plug in yourself. We've had a bunch of customers wire up their own cars, and they've enjoyed it because now they understand where everything goes and what it does. And so basically we're going to pick the, there's an A and B. So we have a left and a right, which is labelled on the actual harness. So it's pretty much idiot proof. Put that in there, plug that in there. So we have a crank trigger, we'll run through the manifold. So that's an FT Spark. That's basically the replacement of that big old box.
So Frank, we've got the whole harness hanging up here. Now it does look like a lot of wiring, but we're not obviously using all of it today. Do you want to just point out what you need to connect up just to get this thing running?
So we'll start off with up here at the ECU. There's two plugs made, plugs A and B in the back of the ECU. Then you have the two nanos, which are labelled left and right, so they're plugged in now.
They're your wide bands.
They're your wide bands. Then we plug in air temp sensor. This one here is just showing it's using one output to trigger the spark. And then you have the most important one is an ignition wire, 12 volt ignition for that from the dyno. And I'm using it, this is the dyno, 12 volt. We're going to turn on the actual ECU and the FuelTech spark box.
Yep.
Then you have basically battery power. So you have a red positive that runs all the way to the battery and a negative. Same with the FT Spark, they have their own power supply. FT Spark has two wires going to the coil like that. And keep in mind, it's only a single coil deal, so we're trying to keep it very simple. We've plugged in a fuel pressure sensor, so we can data log fuel pressure. TPS for throttle position. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 injectors. And we've plugged in our, the other end of our nanos come to the O2 sensor. And a crank trigger. So we've plugged the crank trigger in. We're not using a cam sync, we don't need to for this combination.
And looks like you put in a water temp.
And we've put in a water temp pressure or a water temp sensor and an oil pressure. So we can data log everything. Even though the dyno has it, it's just nice to run it through the ECU. The harness has its own fuses and relays. I mean, if you have fuses for other things like water pumps and relays for trans brakes and so on, but all the harness to start the motor, everything you see was wrapped up in that harness.
Yep.
And there's a lot of things we're not using. I've had to wind a lot of things back, like back pressure and so on. This unit is strong enough to drive a high impedance injector. So because we're not using low impedance injectors, it comes with two plugs and you can just loop them. But if we're going to use a low impedance injector like I use on our XW that makes 2800 horsepower, then we have like a 4 amp box to help amplify the power to the injectors.
Yep. So this is ready to start up.
We're going to draw a map based off the carburetor numbers, how much fuel the engine used, and we know it's the timing, so we should be able to load those two things in. Just allocate that one wire to ignition number 1 on the outputs, and we're going to make sure our timing syncs up. So basically we changed the crank trigger before from a conventional MSD box set up at whatever timing, 25 degrees we were trying to shoot for. Now we've lined it up with 50 degrees and we're going to go and sync the timing in the ECU. So 20 degrees in the ECU will be 20 degrees at the balancer. So when we made 800 horsepower here, we used between 330 to 350 pounds an hour of fuel.
So that gives you a reference point to start with.
So that shows me how much fuel the engine used to make 800 horsepower.
Yeah.
So with the FuelTech, what we like about it is under fuel map, we can go pounds per hour. And basically at 7,500 RPM, we've put about 360 pounds of fuel at 100% throttle as a starting point.
Yep.
So it's going to be pretty close,
Close to what it was, and then we can fine tune it from there.
Well, then I'm on closed loop.
Yep.
And the closed loop will correct me up to 20% if I'm out.
Yep.
We've done that. We've done the same with the timing. I know this engine combination likes about 21 degrees. So I've put 21 degrees in the actual ignition map. And we should be able to make a run without sitting here holding certain RPMs for hours on end, beating up on an engine.
Yeah, okay.
I can go straight into a run like I did with a carburetor.
Yep. All right, well let's fire it up.
No problems. But before we do that, we just got to sync the timing. The nanos are still warming up. So that goes to show you that the map we've got is pretty close to starting up down here. We've got enough fuel numbers for it to idle. Yeah, perfect. Well, what that does now,
So what were you doing there?
basically all I've done is I've just wanted to check at wide open throttle what the air fuel ratio was. It's easy now because we've data logged that with a Carby. Before we didn't have that. So we're just going to pull the log out and basically just check that the fuel pressure's right, the oil pressure's right, the air fuel ratio is correct for the target. So basically, that orange line is us opening the throttle, and it shows it goes to 100%, and the engine went back to 5700 RPM like we wanted it to. And you can see coming on the throttle, the engine's, my fuel map's a little bit out through there, and it shows the closed loop was taking 10% out. If we turn on the correction, so it was only pulling 5% as I was opening the throttle. It was trying to remove 5% of fuel from my map.
Yep.
But when I was 100%, I still must be 10% off the actual fuel numbers. So I'm a bit too rich to say. Ignition timing was smack on 20 degrees where I wanted it at that RPM. Oil pressure was good, a little high, and fuel pressure was spot on. So the black line is the EFI and the red line is the Carby. The red line, that was a carburetor tuned to one of these engines.
Yep.
So it ran in the car like that. And the black line is a fuel map and an ignition map from one of these engines. And that's just how much finer it is.
Yeah.
And that's us pulling 2 to 3 degrees of timing out yet.
Yeah.
So now what we can do here is bring up the log and just confirm that the engine wasn't trying to use more fuel. So someone could say, oh yeah, but they must have already f***ed around with it, you know. I didn't know you were going to take that. but both Carby and fuel map have both been run on one of these engines.
Yes, yes.
So this is a good comparison to have a look at here. So these two lines, if we just turn everything off and we just turn the engine RPM on, and the left and right O2 sensor, and my target, what I was asking for. So the target is the heavy line, and it goes to show, if I turn the TPS on so we can see the throttle opening, I've still got some work to do opening the throttle. It's a bit dirty through there, the engine goes really rich. But as soon as we're on 100% throttle, you'll see the target, the O2 sensors have met the target and is only adding 3% of fuel. So even if the O2 sensor was to go bad, it's minus 3% at that point. You're pretty much well within the ballpark of where the fuel map, it can almost be taken off closed loop. It's that close. But with a carburetor, it just doesn't allow me to draw a target from 1,000 RPM to 9,000 RPM, from 0 throttle to 100%.
Yeah. You have to compromise somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
With a Carby, there's no doubt you could change a bunch of, you know, air bleeds and intermediate, and then take the metering blocks apart and play with the metering blocks. But as you can see, within one pull, we just made more power.
We've had this thing running for like 1 minute.
Yeah. Like, and we didn't have to sit there and individually chase each RPM and each position of the throttle.
Yeah, yeah.
If I wanted to trim the fuel curve, I just got to go back to the log, split the screen, so I can see the log and the fuel map in the one. And then where I was telling you I was rich coming onto the throttle, I can now find that spot, highlight it like that, and I can see right there it starts to get rich right in that large fuel cell number, entering right there and goes all the way back. So I really need to grab from there to there, and I can now multiply that number by the percent I'm too rich by and make another pull, and it should get a lot closer.
So Frank, we just did another pull, 840 horsepower, pretty easy. What did you change to get that?
We just added 1 degree of timing.
1 degree of timing.
Yeah, I mean, it goes to show you it's still got a bunch to pick up through timing.
Yeah, and this is still running on pump 98.
Yeah.
Fuel, so you were saying earlier, if you went to a more exotic fuel, you don't need to worry about rejetting.
No, there's no rejetting. You just basically got to change your target to whatever you think the motor's going to like for an air-fuel ratio target, and it will add providing I've given parameters enough to add fuel, it will add that much fuel if it needs it.
What do you think that's capable of just with a bit more fine tuning? I know a lot of people would say, look, you could fine tune a Carby.
Of course.
That is 100% true, but at some point you're going to have to give up something.
You could be whoever you want to be, but you will never have the drivability of what I've seen over the last 10 years with what we've done with the FuelTech over a Carby. This engine will make 900. I can guarantee you by the time you put a vacuum pump on it.
Oh yeah, I mean, and we've filmed a few of these and making well over 900.
It's already making at 7,500, you know, nearly 850 horsepower on pump fuel, and I've still got a couple more degrees of timing to go before it runs out. Yeah.
All right, we're going to leave you there because we've got a jet, but you guys are going to keep pushing on with more fine tuning.
I won't stop.
We'll let you know what this engine ends up making.
Thank you, man.
All right, cheers.
See ya.